Hello, I'm Don Ward. I'm Chief Executive of CIB, and welcome back to CIB in Conversation. Today, we're pleased to welcome Dr. Rana Khallaf, a prominent early career researcher in Egypt with a rising profile in the CIB network and beyond, and not least for her setting up and her leadership of the Arabs in Academia network, which we will come on to talk about. Just before we get going, a quick reminder that CIB is the global network for collaboration in research and innovation in the built environment, and a very warm welcome to everyone who's watching or listening to this recording. I hope you will enjoy our conversation today. For more information about what we do and how we add value for our global network, please refer to our website, cibworld.org. So, our conversations are all about meeting the personalities behind the leaders in the world of built environment research. And our guest today is Dr. Rana Khallaf from Future University in Egypt. Hello, Rana.
Hi, Don. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much. And it's good to see you. Thank you for joining us today. Let's start by introducing yourself. What's your current role and your involvement in the world of research and innovation in construction and the built environment?
Sure. Thank you for having me here. I'm currently an assistant professor in civil engineering at Future University in Egypt. I also instruct at several other universities, mainly in project management. I am the founder of Arabs in Academia. My main areas of teaching and research revolve around construction, engineering, and management.
Cool. So I'm looking forward to talking about Arabs in academia and about more detail in your research interests. But you know what our listeners quite like to learn about is your background and career. So how did you get into construction in the first place?
I've always known that I wanted to do engineering, and I like working with something that I can see. So I was always drawn to buildings and drawn to looking at how we can build and how we can benefit from all of this infrastructure. So from the start, I knew I wanted to get into construction. I just didn't know if I wanted to work as a site engineer or what exactly. And then I found out about project management, which was a new career relatively in my university. So I started looking into it. I started working in project management from the get-go. Right. I graduated from Ain Shams University here in Egypt in 2010. After my graduation, I started right away with my master's in the same area in university. I also worked at the same time as a teaching assistant at the American University in Cairo and as a project engineer or scheduling engineer here in Egypt. So I tried different hats until I found that I wanted to continue on in education. I founded a consultancy right after I finished my master's. I started working a bit in it, and then I found that I wanted to start my PhD. So I really didn't have any rest. I finished my bachelor's, did my master's, and then got on a plane 2 weeks later to Purdue University to start my PhD.
Excellent, excellent. And what made you so you had some experience in the industry. What were the factors that made you think that academia was for you rather than the site manager role as you described it?
So I liked both roles. I liked industry and academia, but I've always been very fond of research. That was what always kept me in academia. So when I was doing my PhD, I was already working in my consultancy for a bit. And I found that I had to make a decision because having two full-time positions was very difficult. And I loved research. I felt like this is what I wanted to continue on doing. So I felt like I had to step back at least for a bit from industry, get my PhD, and then see what I wanted to do afterwards. I considered going back to consulting, but I just couldn't let go.
So what was the big research question that you addressed in your PhD?
I worked with my advisor, Professor Mark Hastak, and we thought on for a bit what we wanted to do. And eventually I always knew that I wanted to do something related to risk management. So I studied public-private partnership projects. I looked mainly at risks in these projects and looked at interactional analysis between different parties. So the question was, now we have multiple parties in a PPP, who gets to make what decision and what strategy is best for each one of them? So I studied all of these projects and how to create a decision-making tool or framework for them, especially when we have multiple parties involved in such a big and long-term project.
And Mark Hastad is well known to CIB, of course. He's currently our vice president. So you were well connected with the CIB from an early stage of your career. I mean, what was it like doing a PhD? Do you have any tips or advice for anybody else just starting on there, or even just thinking about doing a PhD? What the benefits are, or what to look out for?
Oh, that's a tough one. I have several things I would always advise my students. Choose a university that you like, choose an advisor that you can work with, and choose a topic that you love and that has a future. Because I see a lot of students going after topics that are interesting to them, but are dead-end ideas, not something you can build a research lab off of. So I always tell them, if you love an idea and you feel like it has potential, go for it. But if you love it and it doesn't have potential, then you're going to be wasting your time. I also tell them to expand their network. Yes. I would say this is the second most important thing after the academics, because when you do your PhD, you're mainly one person working in the lab. If you don't interact with others, if you don't expose yourself to different people, then it's going to be difficult to gain exposure and gain knowledge from different areas. I would also recommend that they take courses outside of their area. Two of the best courses I took were really nothing related to my field. One of them was System of Systems Engineering. So this was taught by Aaron Astro at Purdue. So expand, meet new people, always think of how you want to benefit and how you want to lead your life in a year or 5 or 10. If you want academia, then work on your publications. If you want industry, then try to get connected to as many people as you can in that area.
Well, that's a fantastic, almost textbook answer, Rana. Thank you. There will be a lot of people, I think, for whom those tips are extremely valuable. Thank you. We should write a blog on that, by the way. I say you should write a blog on that and I'll publish it at CIB. Just before we move off the PhD part of your career, because as you know, we have so many PhD students involved in our network through the student chapters. So they're a really important and valuable audience for us, and well, they're the future, frankly, of research in our sector. So just give us a highlight from that stage of your career. Was it the work at Purdue with Mark Hastad? Was it some of the networks, or was it what was it actually physically getting the award of the PhD that day?
Oh, that was a great day. The thing about PhD is that you work a lot. You work a number of years and you don't know when you finish. It's not like you know when the milestone is. So if you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, it gets difficult at times. But working with Professor Hastad was wonderful. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot from him. We worked on multiple projects together. We worked on a funded project with the Indiana Department of Transportation, completely different to my research. We worked also on emerging construction technologies, which was through Purdue. So I'd also suggest that every student must try to work on different projects, not just what they're interested in and not just their area. Doing the PhD was amazing in that it gave me a sense of how to do research. So now I feel like I can conduct research in any area, regardless of what it is. That's why it's easy to branch out. But getting a PhD was great. It was that moment when you feel you finally, accomplished something. It was a difficult part afterwards, figuring out, well, what's next? Yes.
So, well, you obviously did then figure out what was next. So you decided to stay in academia, and what was your decision in terms of what was next? What was your next area of research that you did you carry on with looking at PPPs and risk, or did you branch out in another direction?
I did continue on to PPPs. I have several students working on that, mainly in Egypt, trying to understand it. Yeah. I also have a funded project that I recently received through the Science and Technology Development Fund in Egypt to study PPPs for the renewable energy sector. But I've also worked in other areas like lean construction. More recently, I've gone into AI for construction applications, and digital twin. So whenever a new student comes up to me, sometimes they have different interests or they have different backgrounds. A student came up to me a couple of months ago saying that she worked in industry and she wanted to explore blockchain for her company. So I said, sure, let's see how we can do that. Let's see how we can apply this in your master's. So there's always that contemporary researches that either the students want or you find funding for.
And of course that which keeps life interesting. And where is your research in PPP in Egypt then? Where's it got to now? What's the current challenge or the next big question, if you like, that you're looking to address?
Oh, that's a tough one. So we have one main challenge that we started with, which is data. It's very difficult to find data because although we have a central unit for PPPs, they don't have all of the data. And if they do, it's difficult to try to get it from them. So I have a student working on PPPs in Egypt, and he's trying to create a framework for the concession model, but it's difficult to obtain data. And the second is the SCDF project that I mentioned. It's still in the beginning stages, so hopefully there aren't any big challenges, but it's still related to data. Otherwise, the research part is easy. You know, it's easy to collect information and try to frame it and create a framework, but to validate this, that's a tough one.
Right. Okay. And lean construction in Egypt, is that a big area? Is that an area that the industry is showing interest in?
We have a bit of a divide in Egypt, academia versus industry, as many other countries.
Yes.
But in Egypt, most of the contractors, at least the big contractors, have been in business for so long that they don't want to change what they've been doing. So to try to convince them of this is difficult. So one of my students worked at a company and he decided to actually conduct a study on lean. And he went to a project that he had worked on and he stayed there for a couple of months. He started collecting data and he found out the percentages of waste that were going on, the contractor was paying for. And he tried to get it into management to see. So it's a very small change that he's trying to make, but we started looking into that. So we started at a much smaller scale, and now he's trying to see how we can expand that to the company level.
And you're right that you know, lots of people identify this gap between industry and academia. What sort of actions do you think we can take to bridge that gap?
I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to reach the people who have awareness as a start. So we've reached out to several board members, those who were in academia or who do have some knowledge, and they've been very helpful and they've wanted to know more about this research and actually apply it. We've also reached out to some companies who have R&D centers. So this is much easier to get into. And companies that have multiple locations in Egypt and outside Egypt. This also brings them a larger exposure because they know that it's not just how it goes in Egypt. You know, they have seen elsewhere. So it makes it easier to try to convince them of that.
Really powerful. I mean, you know, in CIB, I think it's an important role that we have in helping to facilitate those communication, those conversations. And you know, we've got industry organizations, governments, as well as academia involved in our network. So I think that, you know, we need to work harder, frankly, on closing that gap and demonstrating the value of each other's points of view to the different communities. Where is AI at then, or digital twin, in your thinking in Egypt?
I think it's mainly in the academic world, unfortunately.
Right.
I haven't seen it much in the real world. I've seen it in funded projects. I know several professors who are working on it, and they were able to apply digital twin or building information modeling to real life projects, but that's because they have funding, they have the money to get the tools necessary. So it's mainly been some industry effort, but also through academia. So there's one project, which is the Baron Palace here in Cairo. They've worked on it. They've done the digital twinning of it. And I think they did some renovation based on that. So it was pretty cool to see it actually in action.
And out of all the areas you've talked about, if there was one area that you thought a construction company should really engage with you because it would make such a difference to their business, which would it be? Your work on PPP and risk, or on lean, or on digital twin?
Oh, I would say that the first is lean construction, because you have to lure them in with money that they're going to save.
Right.
So that's the easiest way to approach it. If you talk about lean, if you talk about how we can actually reduce waste and add value to the company, how we can improve every single project or every single department, this is what would make them excited to work. I would also say AI in construction,
Right.
because a lot of what we see in companies isn't really automated. It's all, manual. For example, sometimes you have visual inspection of roadways, but if you can apply certain tools to it, if you can automate this using AI, then that would make it a lot easier. Roadway, you can inspect much more, and it'll be quicker and easier and be better for everyone. So this is another area that is probably there in other countries. It's there, I've seen in the US and Canada. In Egypt, maybe a little less. We're also constrained by the budgets that the university has, or constrained by the possible funding. But I would love to work on that, see how we can actually apply it real life here.
Oh, they're excellent examples, Rana. Thank you very much for covering that area. As we speak, it's June 2021, so we've all been suffering for well over a year now from the effects of the global pandemic. What have you felt any particular impact in your area of work? I don't know, whether that's your life within the university, or whether it's the impact on the particular research topics that you've been studying.
Yeah, I felt it in several ways. The first of which was my funding. I had submitted a proposal in December 2019, but because of COVID, I recently heard back about a month ago.
Right, really? Gosh, yes. That's a big delay.
Yeah.
So you lost a year, effectively, of your potential research program.
Yes, that's true. So we've had to delay it for about a year, but thankfully we're getting started on it, so that's good.
Yeah, good.
With respect to the research itself, a lot of the data collection here has to be manual. So if any of my students want to get data on a project, they have to physically go somewhere and try to get the data from the people. That's been very difficult with COVID, because everything is closed, everything is online. They don't have the data available at home. So this is one area. Another we've seen is in projects. The project delivery methods that we look at are mainly PPP, and we also look at integrated project delivery, or IPD. So some of the projects have, of course, suffered because of COVID, with less revenue. If they're in the maintenance, or if they're in the operation phase, some of the project signing has been delayed. So this is also another area that we're trying to look at and see how construction projects have suffered. And I think that in Egypt, one of the sectors that has suffered the least in terms of lockdown was probably construction, because even when everyone was at home, construction people couldn't really stay home. So construction was still ongoing everywhere. So we want to study that and see how COVID has affected it.
And what do you think there are other impacts still to come, or do you think that there's an upside to the impact in terms of any of your research areas, that perhaps companies will look more closely now at lean or AI, because that you have to people have learned that you've got to work a different way, perhaps?
I think so. I think there are benefits to it, because this has forced people to shift their mentality. Everything used to be paper-based, and you have meetings only face-to-face. I'd never had a meeting with anyone on Zoom before that, especially if you want to get data, if you want to work with someone, you have to see them. So this has made a huge difference in mentality and how people now work. So now they know the power of a Zoom meeting. They know the power of a conference. They're more aware of all of that.
Yeah.
So that means that they're doing more research and trying to understand, well, what else is out there? And I think that with that, they also know that their revenues, some of them at least, the revenues have gone down. So they want to bring the revenues back up again. So how do they do that? The only way is to try to incorporate new methodologies and try to see how they can apply things like lean construction. So how can they actually study each project, or how can they hire a consultant to do this work? And
Yeah.
a lot of my students are actually in industry. It's very common in Egypt to have master's or PhD students who are full-time industry and part-time academia. So almost all of them are doing work for their companies. They're seeing how they can benefit their projects. So if someone is working on a 2-year project, like the new monorail that they're building here, then they want to use this data and they want to see how they can help it. So what usually happens is that if we have different phases of a project, then we try to study one phase and try to see, what went wrong, how can we improve it, and then apply that in the second phase and see the benefits that we got. And this is a big driver for the students to do their master's or PhD, so that they can actually see a difference in their work.
Yes, yes, and of course, if they once they finish the PhD and are able to go back to they're already at their companies, but for those able to then go back to their business, presumably they're motivated to try to get the company to adopt the new ideas, new learning.
Yes, that's true. And I've seen that in very, very few instances, but I've seen people who go on to study, BIM, for example, or they study virtual reality, augmented reality, and then they see how they can apply it. So I've seen examples where they try to apply it in real estate companies here, because real estate is one of the biggest sectors here. It's a booming area. It's where the money is. So if you can convince one more client to buy a house without actually seeing it physically, if you can just show them using VR or AR, if you can show it to them instead of just showing them a small maquette, then they're more likely to spend money. So that's also a driving factor, of course. It's the money. How can we increase the profitability?
Excellent. Rana, you communicate so clearly and effectively about your research area. So it probably should be no surprise that at some point you felt motivated to set up the Arabs in Academia network. So let's talk a little bit about that. Why did you set it up in the first place?
I was in full lockdown. I wasn't used to that. I was used to having constant conferences and meeting new people and, just having something new a lot. And I found myself July 2020, sitting at home most of the time, not meeting people. And I knew I wasn't the only one who was suffering from that. So I wanted to create an outlet or a network for people who have similar interests where they can meet, they can collaborate, they can connect. So Arabs in Academia is mainly a network for all Arab academics. Our main bulk of people are professors, whether they're assistant, associate, or full professors. And then we have postdocs, we have some PhD students in their late stages, and we have those who have ventured away from academia and are in industry, or those who are interested still in academia. And our main group of people either were in North America or are in North America,
Right.
followed by Egypt, Dubai, or UAE, and other countries. We have people in different areas, so it's not only construction or not only engineering. We have people in business, political science, math, physics, astronomy. So it's been really interesting to hear about all of these experiences. And what we do is we have regular networking events. So almost every month we have an event where people meet. And with COVID, it's all been online. But we've managed to connect a lot of people. Some of them even have met physically. So they were able to get to meet new people. We also have regular seminars where some of our members or people from outside the network, they come in, they discuss their topics. We have several people. We've discussed gamification in engineering and in education in general. We've had another seminar on building information modeling. So we've had different ones by our members. We've recently launched a mentorship event as well. So we try to connect mentors with mentees because we have a lot of people who are also early career researchers and people who are postdocs or who are finishing up their PhD. And some of them don't really know what the next step is. They don't know how to land a job or what job would be perfect for them. So we connect them with those who are experienced and we try to help out. We've had our first connection and we're following up on them. They're both in similar areas, so it's easy to see the progress that's made, and it's been very rewarding. I know CIB also has an early career researcher, so I think it'll be interesting to see how both networks can combine.
Yes, and I'm sure that you know, with your help, I'm sure that we will facilitate better collaboration between those networks and others, I think. If people want to learn more, how do they connect with your network?
We're on LinkedIn and we're on Facebook. Our main platform is Facebook. It's a closed group for our members, so you have to sign up. There's a form that you have to fill in indicating who you are, where you work, to make sure that you are, you know, an Arab academic or someone who is interested in academia. And then we have another venue, which is LinkedIn. That's mainly for the news. So it's not the network itself, but you know, you'll receive updates. You'll be able to know what we're up to. Sometimes we have events for AIA members as well as non-AIA members. So that'll be open to everyone. So these are our two main outlets, and you'll find this under the same name, Arabs in Academia.
Excellent, thank you. Is there anything else, any key learning that you say you've had from the Arabs in Academia network, perhaps from the multidisciplinarity, that, you know, from looking at the same topic, but from different disciplines' points of view?
I think it's been very interesting to see how different our areas are, because, you know, you work mainly in construction. You think that's how the other areas will be, but I was exposed to a lot. I've met with people who are in engineering, but in other disciplines. There have been discussions on collaborations in research and otherwise between myself and the members and between the members themselves. So I know of several members actually working on research together right now. I have been exposed to also different areas. So I told you that one of the seminars we had was Professor Maggie Saif al-Nasr, and she discussed gamification, and she was talking about her field and how she looks at it as a CS major. And there was a discussion of, well, how can we apply it in different majors? And then I found out that someone had actually applied it in construction. So there was a big discussion how we can try to benefit from this in our areas as well. So we've had different speakers, and each speaker tries to give us input on their area. Another was Professor Mona Diab, who is a Facebook scientist as well. She also works in academia. So she was telling us about her experience in academia versus industry, and we were trying to see how we can benefit from that as well.
So a fantastic demonstration of the value of the network in terms of understanding other insights, other disciplines, insights into topics. And I'm sure that will have been of great value to your work, as well as for them to hear about what you're doing to aid their work. So Mike, many congratulations on establishing the network. You're well into year 2 now. What's your ambition for the network by the end of, say, next year, 2022?
So we have over 1,000 members. We've done a lot of online meetups, but I would love to take it offline. Hopefully COVID subsides and we'll be able to do that. We have plans for getting funding for the events and funding for research. I would love to see the network grow not just as a network that connects people and helps them share knowledge, but as a network that can also connect AIA with other networks, for example, like CIB and other networks where there'll be mutual benefit to both. So funding would be something that we're definitely exploring.
So very best wishes with that. I know at CIB we're certainly helping to raise the profile of what you're doing, and I'm sure we'll have further discussions about whether there are joint opportunities to bid for funding or other ways in which we can support you. So yeah, I hope it's a successful, even more successful than you hope at the moment in the future.
Do that.
Rana, before we finish, I can't let you go without just talking a little bit more about CIB. How did you originally get involved with the organization?
I receive emails about CIB a lot. I used to receive them from my advisor, Professor Hastak. So whenever there was a conference, he would send it over from my colleagues at the moment as well. And I came across the ECR, the Early Career Researcher Network, and thought I should join it. So I attended the events that you have. I met several people from it, some of whom I'm still in touch with, and we're figuring out how to collaborate. I met people from different areas of the world. So that was interesting to see because in Egypt, you kind of get to meet people who are around you, or people who are in similar universities or close to you, but having a global network helps you meet people who are in different areas or in different countries. You get to be exposed to different researches that people are working on. So right now I'm involved in a couple of commissions and waiting to see what the next step is with CIB.
Yes, well, and thank you. And with your help, I'm sure CIB will be able to go from strength to strength, because as I've said, your clarity of communication and leadership is excellent to see. So thank you for your input so far. Yes, together with Arabs and academia, I'm sure with your involvement, both organizations will be able to grow well.
Thank you, John. I hope so too.
Let's Rana, we finished. We've probably come to the end of our time. So we like to finish these chats by asking for what we're calling your top opportunity. So in your field of expertise, any of the areas that we've talked about, what would you say is the top opportunity or the top challenge that politicians and policymakers, governments around the world ought to be addressing?
I think there are multiple challenges that they can be focused on. And of course, this depends on whether we're talking nationally or globally. But within PPPs, for example, at the national scale here, one problem is that although we have one big entity that's supposed to be ruling all PPPs, there are loopholes to get around going through this unit. So this has been a challenge that we're seeing. So not all projects go through this unit. So it's difficult to find the majority of the projects. This is something that politicians have to work on so that we have a better grasp of all of these projects and try to understand it so we can work on it better. If we're talking at the global scale as well, also related to PPPs, is that we had a research that we're working on for PPPs in the US. So we're trying to compare between the US and Egypt and other countries. And I think it would be great to benefit from the countries that have units already there, mainly in Europe, countries like the UK maybe. So this is something that politicians would need to address. And other areas that we need to work on in general, I would say probably is AI in construction. We need to see how we can incorporate it, because a lot of times here in Egypt, we have new areas that come up every once in a while with funding related to it. And one of these recent areas is AI, and how can we apply it to all of the different fields. So right now we're trying to see how that can be done. So our latest research was related to deep learning applications in construction. And we're trying to apply that step by step in Egypt, so in construction and infrastructure, and see how we can see examples that have already been done in other countries and try to benefit from them and apply it here.
Excellent answer. Thank you very much. And Rana, just thank you so much for your time today. I mean, you've given everyone an insight into your research interests, but also importantly into the Arabs in Academia network. So I'm quite sure that our audience will have enjoyed hearing from you, and I look forward to working with you. I look forward to your continued involvement and continued contribution to our global research network. And I'm quite sure that all our watchers and listeners today will have enjoyed hearing from you. How can they contact you? What's the best way to find you? You're at Future University in Egypt, aren't you?
Yes, I am. So they can find me through my email. It's rana.khallaf@fue.edu.eg. They can find me on LinkedIn. They can find me through the Arabs in Academia network. So all of these, I'm available.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. So to all our listeners and watchers, we always welcome feedback and suggestions for future guests. I hope you've enjoyed today's session as much as I have. I'm Don Ward, and for this episode of CIB in Conversation, it's goodbye. Thank you.